Welcome to Super Nutrition Academy's Health Class with your host and registered holistic nutritionist, Yuri Elkaim. Tune in each week for up-to-date insights on breaking health news and best practices on how to eat for awesome health. It's time to get smarter, healthier, and regain your sanity in a world of information overload. And don't forget to join Yuri at supernutritionacademy.com so you too can master your nutrition and health.
Hey guys, how's it going? Yuri here with another episode of the Super Nutrition Academy Health Class. I hope you guys are doing awesome. We're back up and running in the thick of things, cranking out some amazing interviews, and I got some more amazing ones to come in the coming weeks, so do not miss a single episode. Today, I am joined by my good friend, Mr. UJ Ramdas, and we met each other probably, I don't even know, like a year and a half, 2 years ago now. It seems like time just flies. But he's one of the most incredible human beings you could have the pleasure of meeting. Just to give you kind of, before I introduce him and bring him on, I'll give you his official bio. He has a background in behavioral science, marketing, and hypnosis. He's consulted with several hundred clients, bringing them from confusion to clarity. He's currently based out of Toronto, which is my hometown. And he's a big fan of wilderness, Eastern meditative practices, and a good cup of tea, as well as hot chocolate from Soma, which is an awesome chocolate here in Toronto. But we'll save that discussion for another day. But I think most notably, if you guys have not yet picked this up, if you guys have not heard about this, something called the 5-Minute Journal. It's an awesome kind of gratitude-like journal. And him and our mutual friend Alex Icon were the kind of developers, the creators of this, and it's just kind of taken off. I mean, you guys have been featured on almost every media platform now. It seems that way, anyways. So, anyways,
we're getting in there.
Welcome to the call, UJ.
Thank you so much, Yuri. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah. I think we're gonna have a good time discussing. And just for everyone listening, we're not going to go down the traditional nutrition path today. We're going to talk a little bit about gratitude, positive psychology, habits, overcoming addiction, because that's really UJ's kind of area of expertise. And I think, how you heal anything is how you heal everything, as I often say. So even if you have the food stuff dialed in, there's still a lot of stuff behaviorally and psychologically that still needs to be kind of tuned in. So we'll talk about some of that over the next 30 minutes or so. So what's new, buddy? What's new and exciting?
Well, things are great. We're actually right now focusing a lot on iterating versions of the 5-Minute Journal, just so people understand what we do. So Alex Icon and I created a company called Intelligent Change, and here we produce cool products that make people happier. And I've had an interest in positive psychology for a while, and if you think of it, I'm sure you've read tons of books on happiness, the happiness advantage, stumbling on happiness, etc. And there are tons of TED Talks on happiness, the Paradox of Choice by Barry Schwartz, etc. And yet the one thing that I felt was lacking was, although we had all of this information and knowledge, it wasn't put together in a way that was easy to use and that measurably changed someone's life. And for me, I'm always about brass tacks. I'm a little impatient, as we were chatting a little before the interview started. And I'm interested in introducing these principles that work in a seamless fashion in people's lives. So we're actually iterating another version of the journal as we speak. And lots of fun things to come this year, Yuri.
Yeah, it's awesome. And I mean, I've been using the 5-Minute Journal now for probably close to a year, and it's great. It takes, well, for me, it takes less than 5 minutes, but it's such a great practice for anybody to adopt. And I think the more that I've learned about this whole notion of happiness, which is so elusive for whatever reason to so many North Americans, is like, it really boils down to gratitude. Like, when you appreciate what you have, like I remember this quote by Wayne Dyer where he says, change the way you look at things, and the things you look at change.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that quote is never going to leave my mind. It's so true, because, we can be in a position where we're just completely complacent and ungrateful for whatever it is in our life or whoever it is in our life. And we can shift that simply by looking at them with eyes of gratitude, and it's just shifting perspective. So Anyways, I'd like to get your take on happiness and gratitude and what you've discovered over this journey of yours.
Well, Yuri, I'm a huge fan of evolutionary psychology because to me, from a psychological perspective, it's the most predictive model of human behavior. And when you strip away a lot of a gloss, you figure out the human beings typically operate on 3 levels. And so if you if you cleave the brain from front to back, so let's say from the forehead to the back of your head, into 3 parts, you'll see that the very front, the area right behind your forehead, is the cerebral cortex, and that's the newest part of the brain. That's the part of the brain that comes into being when you practice gratitude. It's the most conscious part of the human being, and it's the most recent part of the brain. The very back of the brain is the reptilian brain, the most ancient part of the brain, the part of the brain that keeps breathing and bodily functions going. Things that we don't even pay attention to naturally get taken care of in the body. And the midbrain, or the limbic brain, is responsible for a lot of the fight or flight. So if you think of human being as a biological organism, from back to front, the complexity increases. That's my mistake.
We'll just have a ringtone podcast.
Exactly. I was looking for my phone. I was like, where is this thing? I should turn this off. In any case, so from back to front, there's increasing layers of complexity. And when people have ideas and notions of happiness, what it is, what it means, it typically comes from the actions that move them towards that come from the midbrain. And a lot of what we found recently is when you make a lot of our unconscious conscious, happiness happens. So to condense this in a quote, there's a really good book I read recently, and a very specific line stood out to me. It said, if you want to be happy, pay attention to what feels good.
It makes sense, right?
Yeah. And it's a simple insight, and it can make a massive difference. And the more you pay attention to that, cultivating the ability to pay attention to what feels good, the happier you'll be.
So how do you distinguish then? So let's say eating donuts and junk food makes me feel good for a couple minutes. How do you where do you draw the line between, okay, I could snort cocaine all day long and feel good, although I wouldn't recommend anybody do that, but I'm just using that as an example. Where do you decipher, how do you distinguish that between feeling good and being aware that what you're doing is actually good for you, and then obviously being aware that it's part of that whole kind of happiness model? I don't know if that's well explained, but anyway.
Mm-hmm. No, it makes sense. So here's the difference. When you do something and it feels wholesome, and when I mean wholesome, I mean long-term wholesome. Most people have a general sense that when they're engaging in addictive behavior, whether it be at eating donuts or gambling, there is this internal craving. There's this internal dissent that pulls them towards this behavior. It's unconscious. And after, they typically will feel a diminishing of happiness. There's guilt or shame or a self-reproach for having done the behavior. Usually that's characteristic of an addictive behavior. Whereas when you do something that feels good in the long term, there's no such dip in emotion. It continues to move up and up, and there's no craving for the action. So right before you're doing the action, if you ask yourself, do I have a craving in my body? Is there almost an addictive craving to do this? It's typically a really good heuristic to figure out whether this is something that is overall going to move me forward or not. Here's another heuristic that I use personally, Yuri, and I haven't talked about this much, so this is going to be interesting.
First time on air. Here we go.
So So for folks who aren't familiar with the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, Abraham Maslow was a pretty prominent psychologist in the 50s and 60s, where he came out with a lot of his best work. And in his mind, the model is that of a pyramid. And it's a pyramid of needs, a hierarchy of needs. The very bottom, they're the physiological needs. So eating, sleeping, shelter, procreation, that kind of thing. The next layer above that is that of safety needs. So shelter, warmth. The layer above that is social needs. Being cared for, being loved, being connected. And the layer above that is self-esteem needs, so feeling worthy, feeling competent, feeling good. The very highest echelon is that of self-actualization. And so they're just levels of consciousness based on what you're paying attention to. And all his writing, all his research, at the very end, he produced a paper that talked about the practical implications of what's the difference between someone who is self-actualized and someone who's not. Like, what does it actually mean, and how can we actually make this work? And the only difference between someone who is moving forward exponentially in terms of growth and someone who is not is, as we go through life, as we go through our days, we have a choice. We have several choices during the day. And it's usually a choice between a growth decision, a choice to consciously grow, or to not. And the only difference between the people who are self-actualized are they choose to make more of those decisions. So I said, how do I systemize this? How do I create a system for this? Because this is what I do, this is what I love. And on my phone, I have a counter. I have an app. And on one side, I have a conscious decision to grow. And on the other side, I have a conscious decision to not grow. And every time I make a decision, I know I'm at one of those crossroads. I can make either decision, but I have to log it in. And if I make a conscious decision to grow, it makes me feel good. And even if I make a conscious decision to not grow, I have to log it in because I have to make that conscious. And the more we make those decisions conscious, the happier we'll be.
That's pretty powerful.
And so if you go back, if you go back to that donut example, most people who know when they're reaching for that donut, they know what they're doing, right? And a part of them knows that it's probably not good for them. Their body is going to react to it not in the best way. And if they have the ability to consciously say, okay, this is a choice that I have for growth or not, and I know this is going to pay off in the long term, it'll make a difference.
That's pretty cool. Yeah, I've never thought of it that way because as soon as you bring it to the conscious level, it's almost like you're having an intellectual conversation with yourself about recognizing what you're about to do or not do. And I think it's a lot of times that can help overcome the initial kind of impulse, which is almost reptilian in some cases to eat that stuff or to do that type of behavior.
Yeah.
That's really cool. Is there a specific app that you use for that people can use, or is it just something you use on your phone?
Actually, I'll just pull it up right now. I don't even know what it's called. It's called My Counter, and I think it's a free app, I believe. I just looked it up on the App Store. MyCountr without the E.
Without the E.
Yeah. It's a really simple app. It's not complex, but the act of making those actions conscious, like we're still evolving every day, Yuri. Like we're a fair distance away from monkeys, but if you look at some human beings, I think that the mark of monkey behavior is restless action and imitation. So when you say monkey see, monkey do, right? Those are mirror neurons at work, but they're also the remnants of almost a prior level of consciousness. And I'm sure you and I know several people, including ourselves, where we've been more restless than we need to be. Right? And so we're always in this conscious making conscious choices to move past that conditioning. And the more we're conscious of our limitations, I think the better off we are.
Yeah, totally. That's great. So what do you say for, I think there's a lot of guilt and shame in all areas of our life. Actually, like a really good book that I'm halfway through right now. It's called Daring Greatly by Brene Brown. I don't know if you awesome. Like, and everyone listening, highly recommend you read it.
Yeah.
She talks a lot about like guilt and shame and vulnerability. But I think there's a lot of that attached to food choices a lot of times and health choices where, you know, we know that we're not making the best decision food-wise yet, and then we just, you know, we sort of like, oh, whatever, I feel like crap, I'm going to have this food. And then afterwards, there's just this overriding feeling of guilt that, oh, like, here I go again, like I meant to stay on this plan and I failed again. You know, they feel they just this, and they associate themselves as opposed to the behavior with the fact that they as a person are a failure, right?
Yes.
As opposed to the act of not doing something or just kind of falling off the wagon. So how do you, I've seen this a lot because, like, for instance, with our Total Wellness Cleanse, we have a very vibrant community within our Facebook group, and we see a lot of this where, you know, it's a 14-day cleanse phase and most people do very well with it. And then sometimes everyone, you know, has, it's like, oh my God, I had a cup of coffee and what should I do? Should I start all the way back at the beginning? It's just, it's very, very self-defeating. And I feel that there's a lot of guilt and shame.
Yeah.
So what advice do you have for somebody who's in that position where they have the best intentions, they fall off the wagon for a meal or a day, and then they're just like, whatever, I'm just going to throw in the towel now because there's no point?
That's a great question. And it's a long question because there's a lot to be said there. So for the audience, just so we're clear, difference between guilt and shame is this. So guilt goes something like, I did that action. That action was bad. That was not good. And that was a mistake. Shame goes something like this. I am a mistake. And those are two very different ways of looking at things. So when someone falls off the wagon, let's say has a coffee, has something that they're not supposed to have, I think a really important mechanism for renewal and recovery is not just recognizing consciously, mentally that you made a mistake, but emotionally moving through the grief of what that mistake meant. And some people are better at this than others. But typically what this means is emotionally coming to terms with this. Now, for almost anyone going through any period of transformation, a really critical factor is having a trusted friend, ideally who is well versed with the issue of transformation, be it cleansing, be it physical fitness, be it whatever goal you're planning to achieve. Having a really good friend they trust and respect, that can take them through the process. We're social beings, and we process emotion, some of us, through talking and through sharing, because shame can only exist when it isn't shared. Shame is darkness. As soon as you turn the light on, as soon as you share it, as soon as you make it public, as soon as it sees the light of day, as soon as people start taking pictures of their food, as soon as they start to reveal their mistakes, however serious they might think it is, the shame and guilt start to move away.
Yeah.
It is the sharing that is really critical, and the social support, because shame exists because people think they will be shunned. People think they will be outcast. People think they would be rejected. That's why they've never shared it.
Yeah, that's really awesome. And just one of the things you just mentioned there in terms of taking pictures of food or your meals, I think that's actually I just wrote that down because I think that's a really powerful process where even if it's on like Instagram or Facebook or something where you have a community of people that can keep you accountable, or even like you don't even know these people, you're just putting it out there because the fact that you're conscious enough to take a picture of the food, upload it to Instagram or Facebook, it kind of forces you to make a better decision because you're like, well, I'm not going to really put up a picture of chicken wings and French fries.
Exactly.
So so now my creative wheels are turning with that. So I'm going to think of some stuff with that to further support people in their way of kind of sticking with their healthy intentions. But yeah,
absolutely,
that's a great explanation of like guilt versus shame and kind of how to deal with some of that. Because yeah, I think it's a very important distinction. And even like when like with kids, for instance, it's not like and this is actually something I've been very conscious of with my children is that I don't even remember where I heard this from, but it was about praising the behavior, not the person necessarily. So it's like, I don't say a good boy, Oscar, right? I say, hey buddy, you did a great job with that specific thing, right?
Yeah.
Where it's not like his self-worth is not attached to, like, it's like, oh, bad boy or good boy. Like, he's a good boy just because he's a human being, he's worthy of love and all that stuff. And I think it's a really important distinction. I know I've been very conscious of this listening to other parents and even grandparents talk with their kids and grandkids. It's like good boy or bad boy or stuff like that. And I was like, it's let's encourage the behavior as opposed to the actual person themselves, because we don't want them to really. Anyways, I mean, whatever, kind of going off on a tangent, but. No,
actually, it's kind of relevant. There's something I'd like to share here, if you don't mind, Yuri, is so one of the foremost scientists in the field of behavioral science is Professor B.J. Fogg at Stanford, and he's done an incredible ton of good research when it comes to building habits and building, almost working in the industry where some of his students have gone. I think one of his students was a co-founder of Instagram, really changed fundamentally human behavior in a very large scale. And one of his favorite books, and one of my favorite books for parenting, is Don't Shoot the Dog. And it's a dog training book by Karen Pryor. Now, people, I don't want people to take offense to this, but really, a lot of what it is about positive and negative reinforcement, and about at the very exact time a behavior happens is to reward it. And Josh Waitzkin, I've always found this interesting. Josh Waitzkin is I think a 10-time national chess champion since he was 6 to 17, child prodigy, went on to become a Tai Chi international champion in 6 years, having never picked up a sport in his life before that. So he's a learning animal. I found it very interesting. He wrote a book called The Art of Learning, which is one of my favorite books of all time. And his mother was a horse trainer. And unequivocally, almost everyone I meet who has been an animal trainer have incredible kids. And I don't think that's an accident.
Yeah.
It's because they understand what works and what doesn't work in building behaviors.
That's very true.
And character is all but a bundle of behaviors.
Yeah, I mean, I would say like having 2 dogs before I had kids was a good stepping stone, because there was a lot of responsibility in terms of reinforcements. And like, it's funny because it's all just applied psychology. I remember first year university learning about classical conditioning and Pavlov, and it's the same. Like, honestly, having 2 little kids now and one more on the way, it's I don't want to compare them to dogs, but it's very similar. Like, if kids react or do things, if they're crying their face off and they're trying to get your attention and you reward them with some attention, or something, they learn that it's like, when I do this, I get this.
Right.
I will continue doing this. And that's why I'm a big fan of extinction, which is just kind of ignoring bad behavior. Right?
It's a great concept.
And it's worked well for our kids. I mean, there's a certain age, I think, whereby you have to be obviously very nurturing to your babies and stuff. But from my experience, after about 6 months, they start to kind of clue into the system. And they're like, so if I scream my face off, I'm going to get mommy and this is what's going to happen. So I'm going to continue doing that. But yeah, like and that's why I think like coming back to this whole discussion of having a good understanding of how humans behave, how we can learn, how we are reinforced. So I think those books so Don't Shoot the Dog and The Art of Learning.
Yes.
I'm going to grab those because I'm on a mission to read like a book a week.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah, those are really cool.
I started with The Art of Learning. It's just an incredible insight into a world-class performer and really what goes behind the psychological makeup of someone who does things like that.
Yeah, and I think that would be valuable for pretty much anybody because, like, let's say, you watch the Olympics and you see these unbelievable athletes. It's not that you go to the gym to train to become an Olympic athlete in most cases, but you can learn a lot about from like what they're doing, little nuances that can help you in your life and your training. And then the same with that. It's like you can learn from, people like these, amazing prodigies or just kind of like whiz kids who are able to learn and acquire things really quickly and just learn like what are the mnemonics, like what are the little things that they're doing that we don't know about, right? It's almost like little cheats and little hacks. So yeah, that's awesome.
Absolutely.
With let's talk about habits before we wrap up, because habits are really important. Obviously, with pretty much any area of life, there's a lot of I'm not going to say a lot of debate because I'm not really in the circles to know if there's a lot of debate about it. But there's people that talk about it takes 21 days to develop a habit. Other people have said 66 days. What are your thoughts on habit development, and what do you think is probably the most important components to developing a good habit or overcoming a bad one?
So first things first. So I choose to implement one habit at a time. Not 2, not 4, not 6, not 8. One habit or one theme at a time. And there is a lot of research and debate around how long it takes to develop a habit. And to me, it depends on the level of complexity. So for a logging behavior, which is the behavior we talked about earlier about logging growth behaviors versus conscious choices not to grow, that's a logging behavior. That's a very simple behavior. And it can take under 5 entries to make that a consistent habit. Mental rehearsal can speed that up.
So when you say mental rehearsal, is this like a visualization ahead of time? Or?
Yeah, you can call it visualization ahead of time. You could call it imagery, what works for you. But mentally doing that is actually a shortcut to building a lot of behaviors. Because frankly, I think learning how to use our imagination is one of the most critical things that we're not taught in school. It's, I think I read a quote a couple of days ago that said, logic will take you from A to B. Imagination will take you everywhere.
That's good.
And learning to do that can substantially speed up the process. It's the exact same with more complex behaviors. Now, with more complex behaviors, it really depends. If it's learning to go to the gym, that's a series of smaller behaviors. And the more you're able to chunk that down into bite-sized habit chains, the more you'll be likely to actually go execute the process. And shame prevents a lot of this, by the way. So let's say someone chooses to go, says, I'm going to start going to the gym 3 times a week. And he goes for 2 weeks and then misses a Monday. Now, when that happens, the person might go, oh, I'm a bad person. I didn't go to the gym. Maybe I can never do this. That's a thinking process. However, if the person starts to look at all the smaller chunks that go into that behavior and just works on perfecting those small chunks, keeping your shoes and your gym bag in your car. There's a really good book called Nudge that talks about how you can make habits seamless and effective just by placing the right things at the right place. So triggers in other words, can really help habit building become seamless. And this one thing can accelerate or amplify habit building behavior by easily 3 to 4 times is a real world consequence to not achieving that. And Yuri, I'm a fan of this because I think we met a couple of months ago, and I think someone said they wanted to achieve a certain goal. I said, what's the real hard world consequence that you can attach to that to make sure it gets done? And they picked something that was meaningful for them, and as you know, it got done. So real world consequences help you propel yourself. And we know we're propelled through pleasure and pain. Guess what? Human beings respond more to pain than pleasure. That's how we're hardwired. So let's make use of that.
That's very cool. Yeah, that's great insight. Dude, you're such a bottle of wisdom. It's so great to talk to you about this stuff. I mean, we could talk about this all day.
My pleasure, man. This is fun.
So for everyone listening, again, I want to give you guys the website to check out the 5-Minute Journal. It's 5minutejournal.com, and that's spelled F-I-V-E, so not the actual number, 5minutejournal.com. Currently on back order because it's probably just so popular that it's, you guys can't even produce enough.
We're in stock in 2 days.
Yeah, it's such a great little tool. I mean, it's as I mentioned to you, I use it while I'm on the toilet. So it just sits on the back of my toilet when I do my business. I just do my stuff in the morning, do it at night. It's awesome. And it's all about, again, appreciating the little things throughout the day, setting yourself up to win, acknowledging those little successes. And, as we've discussed, it's a really important step in, increasing our happiness. So I'd recommend everyone listening to go to the website, order for yourself. And it's actually a great gift as well for like Christmas or birthdays or just for anyone you care about. Really, really cool, and they'll probably really appreciate it. Yeah, so I want to thank you so much for taking the time, UJ. It's been a pleasure. Anything you want to finish with?
Yeah, seriously. So as of today, we're launching an app. So for those listening, you can go to the App Store, search for 5-Minute Journal, and you'll be able to use the app version of it, which is the exact same format. It's just digital, and it's going to be a little easier for you if you're on the move, you're listening to this on the go. You can just check out what it's about right now.
Awesome. Yeah. So I'm going to get the app as well. And why not have the app and the book or the journal? It's awesome. Really cool. So thank you so much for taking the time, buddy. I've learned a ton out of this interview, and I'm sure everyone listening has as well. So that's all from me today, guys. Thank you once again to our guest, UJ Ramdas from the 5minutejournal.com. And I look forward to seeing you guys in the next episode.
Thank you, Yuri. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely.